Around 8 p.m. on September 18, 2008, at Building 349 on Yishun Avenue 11 in Singapore, the calm evening atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by the sounds of an argument between a man and a woman. However, the neighbors didn't pay much attention, as such disputes are not uncommon in any household. It's part of normal married life. Moreover, since it was still early in the evening, no one stepped in to intervene. As expected, after a while, the argument quieted down. People thought there was nothing to worry about. As night fell and the early morning hours approached, most people were still asleep. Suddenly, the cries of a woman begging for help echoed from the building, accompanied by the loud clash of furniture. A neighbor living on the floor below heard the woman's pleas and sensed that something dangerous was happening. At around 12:50 a.m., he called the police. While the man was explaining the situation to the police, a loud noise suddenly erupted, followed by a woman's desperate scream. When he looked more closely, he saw a woman falling from the building. Once she hit the ground, she no longer moved. The police immediately arrived at the scene. Under Building 349, they found the woman lying motionless, her body covered in blood, and she had stopped breathing. After a preliminary inspection, the police stated that the woman appeared to be around 30 years old, but they were unable to identify her at the time. Since the caller was unsure which floor the argument came from, Singapore police decided to cordon off the entire building and proceed with a step-by-step investigation. Fortunately, the building had only 12 floors, so the investigation wasn't too difficult. From the top floor down to the 7th, they found no signs of anything unusual. It wasn't until they reached the 6th floor that the police came upon a storage room where they discovered fresh bloodstains. It seemed like the problem was inside. However, no matter how persistently the police knocked, there was no response from within. The door had a 2-layer design with a sturdy outer security gate, so the police had to call in the fire department for assistance. Unexpectedly, while waiting, a man opened the door from the inside. He said, "My name is Wang Zhijian. While cutting some fruit, I accidentally injured my hand, and I was about to go see a doctor." The police noticed that his hand indeed had bloodstains. However, the excuse of cutting fruit seemed hard to believe. To prevent any further incidents, the police asked the man to stay where he was, while the fire department quickly arrived. They destroyed the security gate and entered the apartment with the bloodstains. The scene inside left the police in shock. It looked like a living nightmare. Blood was everywhere. In one room, they discovered 2 women lying in pools of blood, one on the bed and another near the door. In the second room, the floor was covered with similar horrifying traces, but no one was there. As they reached the bathroom, also stained with blood, they found a girl, over 10 years old, lying on the floor. Including the woman who had fallen from the building, the police counted a total of 4 victims. This was truly a horrific case, unlike anything even the most seasoned officers had ever witnessed. Singapore, known as one of the safest countries in the world, prided itself on its very low crime rate. Now, with such a particularly serious case at hand, the police were not only shocked, but also under immense pressure to solve the case successfully. Fortunately, there was a young girl in the bathroom who, despite being covered in wounds, was still breathing faintly. Without hesitation, the police rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. As for Wang, the man who had opened the door, he immediately became the prime suspect. He was arrested and taken in for questioning. In the initial investigation, the police learned that the 3 deceased victims, the surviving girl, and the sole suspect were all from China. As a result, the Chinese embassy in Singapore took an interest in the case and assisted the local police in their investigation. With the support of the Chinese embassy, the police quickly obtained detailed information about everyone involved. The victim found on the bed in the room was identified as Zhang Meng, 42 years old, born in 1966 in Tianjin, China. Zhang was working in the maritime industry, and her family was relatively well off. She had a daughter with her husband, but the couple later divorced due to marital conflicts. For the sake of her daughter's education, Zhang decided to leave everything behind in China and move to Singapore because her daughter was studying there. The other victim, found on the floor, was Feng Jianyu, 17 years old, Zhang's daughter. In December 2007, she and her mother had relocated to Singapore to live. Although her English wasn't very strong, Feng had made many friends there. Her classmates described her as lively and outgoing. The victim who died after falling was Wang Zhijian, 36 years old, born in 1972 in Shenyang, China. She had been married twice and was working as a real estate agent. For the sake of her eldest daughter's future, she decided to send her daughter to study in Singapore. Like Zhang, Yang became an accompanying mother. The surviving girl was 15-year-old Li Meilin, who, after receiving timely medical treatment, survived the life-threatening ordeal. Li was Yang's eldest daughter. She was an excellent student, consistently at the top of her class. Li and her mother lived together in a rented apartment. Zhang was the first tenant of the apartment and later sublet a room to Yang, who shared a similar background and hometown. At this point, the police began investigating the only suspect in the case, a man named Wang, who was 42 years old at the time, born in 1966 in Tianjin, China. He had previously worked as a manager at the Tianjin port and had gone through a failed marriage. Wang had a son, but in the divorce, custody of the boy was granted to his ex-wife. According to his passport records, this was not Wang's first time in Singapore, though the exact reason for his visit remained unclear. The question that arose was, why was Wang there? And what conflict did he have with both mother-daughter pairs? As news of the case quickly spread, it caused a stir within the Chinese community in Singapore. People began speculating about the relationship between Wang and the victims. Some rumors suggested that Wang was Yang's boyfriend, and they had been seen shopping together, engaging in affectionate behavior. However, Yang's close friends and family firmly denied this, stating, "There's no way that's true." They claimed that Wang Zhijian was actually Zhang Meng's boyfriend, and it was Zhang who brought him into the house. However, neighbors living nearby reported that they had never seen Wang and Zhang display any affection or go out together. Some even speculated that Wang was romantically involved with both Zhang and Yang. In short, the conflicting accounts caused confusion and chaos within the Chinese community. Yet, with strong support from the Chinese embassy, the truth gradually surfaced. The investigation revealed that Wang was, indeed, Zhang's boyfriend. Both were from Tianjin and had known each other since 1996 when they were involved in stock trading. However, they lost contact for several years. It wasn't until Wang's divorce in 2005 that Zhang reached out to him and the two started dating. Notably, at that time, Zhang was still married, but she deceived Wang by telling him that she was single. By June 2006, Zhang finally confessed to her boyfriend that she was married, which made Wang hesitant. He believed that, given his good looks and certain career success, he could easily find a more attractive woman. As a result, Wang suggested they break up. However, Zhang refused and explained that she had no intention of deceiving him, insisting that her feelings for him were genuine from the first time they met. She expressed her desire to spend the rest of her life with him. To prove her sincerity, Zhang even bit her finger and wrote a letter in blood that said, "I love Wang, and I only want to marry you." Moved by Zhang's dramatic gesture, Wang made a vow and promised to love her forever. He even demonstrated his love by getting a tattoo of Zhang's name on his back. But as the saying goes, forever doesn't last forever. Very soon, Zhang's husband, Feng Jianyu, found out about everything. Feng, a mature man and a government employee, did not resort to violence. Instead, he invited Wang to meet and talk. When Wang arrived, Feng asked Zhang to choose between the two men. Without hesitation, Zhang chose Wang. Although Feng accepted his fate, Zhang's family did not agree with ending the marriage. Zhang's parents didn't want their granddaughter to live with a stepfather. Her family also believed that Wang had seduced Zhang and deliberately destroyed their family. This led to constant clashes between both sides, with threats and even physical fights. The scandal tarnished Wang's reputation at his company, and he felt too ashamed to stay. Therefore, Wang decided to take early retirement. Wang Zhijian received a retirement payout of 400,000 RMB, equivalent to about $57,000, from his company. After that, Zhang and Wang lived freely, fleeing to Chengdu to escape her family's opposition. In 2007, Zhang successfully finalized her divorce. However, shortly after the divorce, her ex-husband Feng Jianyu was diagnosed with a stroke. At that moment, Zhang had a change of heart and decided to move back in with Feng to help care for him. By this time, their daughter, Feng Jianyu, had grown older. Zhang felt it was important to provide a better education for her daughter, and the family's financial situation was stable enough to make that happen. So, in December 2007, she sent her daughter to study in Singapore, becoming an accompanying mother. Initially, with Zhang's move abroad, her relationship with Wang came to an end. After all, with one person in the country and the other abroad, they had little chance of meeting. But in 2008, when her daughter had a school break, Zhang returned to China and reunited with Wang. The two rekindled their old relationship. Zhang hoped Wang would move to Singapore to find work so they could be together and ease the longing they felt for each other. Wang thought it would be a good opportunity to see a new and unfamiliar world, so he agreed. In July 2008, Wang traveled to Singapore for the first time. During this time, due to visa issues, he had to return to China a few times. Each time he was in Singapore, he stayed in the apartment Zhang had rented. Unfortunately, after just over 2 months of living together, tragedy struck. Inside the apartment, the police found 4 knives believed to have been used in the crime, suggesting that Wang had switched weapons during the attack. What was particularly shocking was that Wang acted as if he held deep resentment toward the victims. His attacks were incredibly brutal. Zhang was found motionless on the bed with 48 stab wounds, 6 of which were severe. Zhang's daughter, Feng, was stabbed 45 times, with 12 of the wounds proving fatal. The surviving girl, Li Meilin, was also attacked with 41 stab wounds but was lucky to survive. As for Yang, who fell from the building, her body had the fewest stab wounds, mostly concentrated on her arms. During his interrogation by the police, Wang revealed the reasons for his actions. He stated, "I always loved Zhang, but she didn't treat me well. She wanted a better lifestyle, and to meet her demands, I bought her clothes, handbags, and paid for fancy dinners. Because of this, my 400,000 RMB retirement fund was long gone." By the time Wang arrived in Singapore, he was alone and without much money. His life became more difficult, as Singapore's cost of living was very high. In July, when he first arrived in Singapore, Wang brought only 2,800 Singapore dollars, around $2,000. He had no idea that within just 4 days, he would spend it all. Wang explained that finding a job in this country wasn't easy. Eventually, someone offered to help him find a job, but it required a payment of more than 10,000 Singapore dollars in fees. At this point, Wang was broke, and Zhang Meng didn't give him any money. As a result, Wang's life became increasingly difficult. He said, "During my time in Singapore, I mostly hid in the room because Zhang told me not to let anyone know about our relationship. If someone was at the house, I wasn't allowed to leave the room. Especially when Feng was at home, because she harbored deep resentment toward Wang. Feng always believed that her mother's lover was the reason her mother left her father. Although Wang bought many gifts to try to make amends with her, Feng never showed any gratitude. Since there was no bathroom in the room, Wang had to relieve himself in plastic bags and newspapers. He would wait until everyone left the house to go outside and dispose of them. Even more shocking was that Zhang didn't allow Wang to wear clothes in the room, not even underwear. Every time Wang tried to put something on, Zhang would hit him. Each day, in addition to meeting Zhang's needs, Wang was responsible for cleaning the room, doing the laundry, and cooking for Zhang and her daughter. As for meals, Wang could only wait until Zhang and her daughter had finished eating, and then he would eat whatever leftovers they left behind. Zhang often insulted Wang as well, claiming that he was worthless now that he had spent all of his savings, implying he had no more use to her. Wang Zhijian said, "Although my heart was filled with anger, living under someone else's roof, I didn't dare to fight back." As a result, Wang's life in Singapore was miserable. A week before the incident, Zhang Meng suddenly craved king crab. However, whether in Singapore or elsewhere, this type of food is always expensive. A typical crab can cost anywhere from 200 to 300 Singapore dollars. Despite having no money, Wang still managed to buy 2 crabs, spending over 700 Singapore dollars for Zhang and her daughter. They enjoyed the meal immensely, but Wang wasn't given any. It was a cruel way to treat him, but at that point, Wang still didn't have any intention of committing a crime. However, a few days later, they asked for king crab again. This time, Wang couldn't afford it. He wanted to save some money, but Zhang wouldn't let it go, demanding the crab and repeatedly insulting Wang, calling him useless. Wang had no choice but to give in and buy some fish instead of king crab. This infuriated Zhang, who continued to berate Wang, calling him useless for not even being able to buy crab. Soon after, their argument was heard by the neighbor downstairs. Around 9 p.m., the argument finally stopped. Wang lay next to Zhang Meng, but the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He recalled the past years, how he had spent all his savings and was left with nothing. Now, he was disrespected by both Zhang and her daughter, living under someone else's roof with no dignity. The more Wang dwelled on it, the more agitated he became. In his mind, Wang Zhijian decided to go to the kitchen to wash his face and calm down. At that moment, he unexpectedly saw a knife in the kitchen. All of his anger erupted instantly. Wang grabbed the weapon and returned to the room. Seeing Zhang fast asleep, without saying a word, he began the attack. During this, Zhang cried out for help a few times, but everything happened too quickly. She soon stopped breathing with 48 stab wounds on her body. Meanwhile, Feng Jianyu, who was sleeping in the living room, heard the commotion. She opened the door to check, and just as Wang, now out of control, saw someone entering the room, he rushed at her with the knife. Once Feng was silenced, Wang then heard the door to Yang Ji's room next door opening. Fearing that his actions would be discovered, he grabbed the knife again and stormed into the adjacent room. At this point, Yang and Li had already woken up. Although they tried to fight back, Li suffered multiple wounds as she faced Wang's strength. Yang seized the opportunity to escape the room. At the same time, Wang had overpowered Li and left the apartment in search of Yang. After searching and failing to find her, he returned to the room, only to discover that Li had locked herself inside the bathroom. At this point, Wang swapped his knife for a new one. He began pounding on the bathroom door, eventually breaking in and continuing his brutal attack on Li. After finishing the assault, Wang suddenly heard a loud noise. He went to the balcony and saw that Yang had fallen to the ground. Once everything was over, Wang started to pack his belongings to escape. But to his surprise, the police arrived quickly and sealed off the entire building. Left with no other option, he returned to his room. It was then that Wang's bloody handprint ended up on the security door frame. After being arrested, Wang Zhijian admitted that Zhang and Feng's deaths were indeed his doing. Li Meilin's survival was beyond his expectations, but Wang couldn't recall why he attacked them. He stated that at the time his mind was completely blank, and it wasn't until after he took a shower that he realized what he had done. As for Yang, Wang adamantly denied pushing her and said, "I don't remember attacking Yang at all." However, the reality was different. The police had gathered comprehensive evidence from the apartment and concluded that Wang's account was not entirely truthful. First, Yang Jie had multiple knife wounds on her hands. Additionally, near the balcony wall, close to a bamboo pole, traces of blood were found. Tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Yang. The prosecutor in Yang's case argued that after Yang ran to the balcony, she tried to grab onto the bamboo pole to escape. However, Wang discovered her and began frantically attacking her fingers with a knife, causing her to fall from the high floor. This means Yang's death was also directly caused by Wang. Next, Li, the sole survivor, was also the key witness. She contradicted Wang's account. Wang claimed that Yang and Li had voluntarily opened the door, allowing him to rush in and attack them to keep his secret. However, Li stated that she and her mother heard a noise and were terrified. While they were hesitating about whether to call the police, Wang stormed into the room with a knife. He immediately began a frenzied attack. During the chaos, Yang seized the opportunity to escape the room. Despite being seriously injured, Li managed to kick Wang, giving herself a chance to hide in the bathroom. Wang then switched knives, broke down the bathroom door, and continued his attack. Later, the police found blood on the handle of Yang's bedroom door, belonging to Wang, Zhang, and Feng Jianyu. This proved that what Li said was true. Wang had opened Yang's door himself. The police conducted DNA tests on the 4 knives they found and determined that the serrated knife was the weapon used to attack Zhang and Feng. Meanwhile, a different knife was used to attack Li and Yang. This evidence shows that after attacking Zhang and her daughter, Wang went to the kitchen to get another knife. Wang's claim that he didn't clearly remember why he attacked them was also false. Afterward, he took a shower, changed his clothes, treated his wounds, and hid the weapons while packing his belongings in preparation to flee. All of this indicates that he was fully aware of his actions. The police also discovered that Wang and Zhang's relationship had ended long before, which was evident from the tattoos on his body. In 2007, Wang had tattooed Zhang's image on his back. However, about 8 months later, they had a falling out. Wang then tattooed an image of the Grim Reaper and a venomous snake on both arms. The police believe that Wang was symbolically referring to Zhang as the snake. It's likely that Wang had harbored resentment toward Zhang for a long time, and the argument over the crab was merely the excuse that triggered his violent outburst. Finally, on November 22, 2011, after a lengthy investigation and the collection of evidence, the final trial took place at the Supreme Court of Singapore. It had been more than 3 years since the case occurred. The crime had caused a sensation both in Singapore and China, with many people forming their own opinions about Wang's guilt. Initially, everyone believed that the trial would be a formality and that the perpetrator would be quickly sentenced. However, the case took some unexpected turns. During the trial, the defense argued that Wang had killed Zhang Meng and Feng, but there were mitigating factors. The defense claimed that Wang had been under Zhang's control for a long time, especially during his humiliating life in Singapore. In addition, he had lost his job and his savings and had suffered from constant harassment and threats from Zhang's family. As a result, Wang experienced prolonged psychological pressure, leading to an adjustment disorder and emotional suppression. In summary, the defense argued that Wang had suffered from psychological instability and lost control of himself due to extreme anger. Furthermore, Wang Zhijian stated that he could not clearly remember the details of the crime, which was consistent with symptoms of a mental disorder. The defense's psychiatric expert cited various sources on mental disorders to support this theory. Therefore, the defense argued that Wang's case had mitigating circumstances and that he should be convicted of manslaughter, with a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, or less than 10 years in prison. On November 3, 2012, 4 months after the prosecution submitted its evidence, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. The judge took into account the psychological report, concluding that Wang did indeed have mitigating factors. He had committed the tragic acts while in a state of loss of control. As a result, the judge ruled that for the deaths of Zhang and her daughter, Wang was guilty of manslaughter. However, in the case of Yang Ji's death, the judge ruled that there were no mitigating factors. After Zhang and her daughter were killed, Wang had paused, changed weapons in the kitchen, and even told Li Meilin, "Don't do anything stupid." This demonstrated that he was in a clear mental state at that time. Moreover, Wang's primary targets were Zhang and Feng. After dealing with them, his anger had subsided, and he had regained his rationality. Therefore, the judge sentenced Wang to death. Notably, when the sentence was announced, Wang actually smiled. Throughout the trial, he often smiled inappropriately, which made people feel uncomfortable. Immediately after the verdict was announced, the case sparked significant debate in society. Although Wang Zhijian was sentenced to the maximum penalty, given the fact that Zhang Meng and Feng Jianyu had a combined total of 93 stab wounds on their bodies, the victims' families felt that calling such brutality manslaughter was absurd. As a result, the plaintiffs immediately filed an appeal. Surprisingly, Wang himself was also dissatisfied with the verdict and filed an appeal. On November 28, 2014, the court re-examined the case. After careful consideration, the court dismissed Wang's appeal and accepted the plaintiff's appeal. In the retrial, the judges disagreed with Wang's claim that he had lost control. Consequently, the judge overturned the previous decision and rejected the mitigating circumstances for Wang regarding the deaths of Zhang and her daughter. Instead, he was sentenced to death for the intentional murders of Zhang Meng and her daughter. This time, as the verdict was read, Wang Zhijian finally stopped smiling. Perhaps he realized that his fate was now sealed. Most people were in agreement with the final outcome and felt a sense of relief. This case was one of the worst in Singapore in the past 15 years. Although it had concluded, its impact on the Chinese community in Singapore remained strong. The case also shed light on other aspects, such as the difficult lives of mothers who accompany their children abroad for education. In their first year living in Singapore, these mothers are unable to obtain work permits. To survive, they can only take on jobs as cleaners or work in cafes, bars, and similar places. Additionally, the Chinese community in Singapore had not been well regarded even before this case, and the incident further damaged the trust people had in the Chinese population there. This led to a significant decline in job opportunities for them. Furthermore, many families who had initially planned to send their children to study in Singapore reconsidered and withdrew. Lee, the sole survivor of the case, faced great difficulty in deciding whether to stay in Singapore alone to continue her education. She relied on her mother's savings and contributions from the community to cover tuition and living expenses. Although she spent a long time recovering, both the physical scars and the trauma of that night left a deep impact on her. Li Meilin's right eye was blinded by a knife wound. Despite these challenges, she managed to successfully complete her studies. Let's all wish her a brighter future. And that concludes the story. What are your thoughts on today's case? Feel free to leave your comments below. Goodbye, and see you next time.